Before we start tonight, I need to tell you something. I have narrated a lot of strange stories on this channel. Dennis Martin vanishing into a forest in 6 seconds. Kelly and Hopkinsville, a farmhouse under siege by something that was not quite human. But every time I research these cases, there's always a moment, usually around 2 a.m., alone with my notes, where I ask myself the same question. Why do certain places keep doing this? Why does the same 200 square mile patch of land, generation after generation, produce ghosts and monsters and lights in the sky? And things that walk out of the swamp and are never explained? Is it a coincidence? Is it geology? Or is it something older than any of us want to admit? Tonight we are going somewhere I have been avoiding for a while. Not a house, not a single night, an entire region, 200 square miles of forest and swamp in southeastern Massachusetts that locals have been afraid for 300 years. They call it the Bridgewater Triangle. Get comfortable, turn the lights down if you can, and by the end of this one, I want you to write to me. Because if you have ever lived somewhere that felt wrong, somewhere the neighbors did not like to talk about after dark, I think you will understand exactly why. Let's begin. Southeastern Massachusetts. If you drew a rough triangle on a map connecting the towns of Abington, Rehoboth, and Freetown, you would enclose roughly 200 square miles of some of the strangest terrain in New England. At the center of it sits the Hockomock Swamp, 6,000 acres of wetland, so thick, so waterlogged that colonial settlers refused to build on it, refused to farm it, and eventually just refused to go in. Here's the first thing you need to understand. The name Hockomock is not random. It comes from the Wampanoag language. Translated, it means place where spirits dwell. The Wampanoag people lived on this land for thousands of years before any European set foot here, and long before ghost stories, before UFO reports, before any of the modern legend. This swamp already had a reputation. It was considered sacred. Some accounts say it was considered dangerous, not in a physical sense, but spiritually. A place you respected, a place you did not disturb. Then came 1675. This is the part of the story most horror channels skip. But I think it's the most important part, because I don't believe you can understand what people see in the Bridgewater Triangle without understanding what happened there first. King Philip's War, one of the bloodiest conflicts per capita in American history. A war between English colonists and a coalition of native tribes led by Metacomet, known to the English as King Philip, son of the Wampanoag leader Massasoit. The war tore through this exact region, and its final chapter played out less than a mile from the heart of the Hockomock Swamp, at a place still called Anawan Rock, where the last Wampanoag War captain, Anawan, was cornered and forced to surrender in August 1676. Shortly after, Metacomet himself was killed nearby. His body was dismembered. His head was displayed on a pike in Plymouth for over 20 years. Now, I'm not here to tell you a curse did this. I don't believe in easy answers, but I think it's worth sitting with the fact that this land, the same swamp now famous for glowing lights and phantom animals, was also the site of the war that ended in a massacre, displacement, and the deliberate humiliation of the dead. Trauma leaves a mark on people. Maybe in the stories we tell, it leaves a mark on places too. Fast forward 300 years. By the mid of 20th century, the Bridgewater Triangle had earned a new kind of reputation. Not historical, but paranormal. Beginning in the 1970s, multiple independent witnesses across the region reported seeing enormous birds, wingspans described as 8 to 12 feet, gliding low over roads and swampland. Not eagles, not herons. Witnesses, including police officers, described something closer to a pterodactyl. In Wampanoag oral tradition, long before colonization, there were stories of small, gray-skinned, aggressive beings said to inhabit these woods. Tricksters capable of causing fires, pushing people off the cliffs, and luring travelers into the swamp, never to return. Locals still report encounters with small humanoid figures in the Freetown State Forest to this day. Drivers passing through the swamp at night have reported glowing orbs, sometimes red, sometimes white, hovering just above the road, occasionally following vehicles for several hundred feet before vanishing. In the 1970s alone, dozens of residents reported a massive black dog with glowing red eyes wandering the roads near the swamp. An animal that seemingly left no footprints and was never captured on a film. Despite repeated sightings by multiple unconnected witnesses over several years, and then, in that same decade, something darker began. Between 1978 and the early 1980s, an unusual number of livestock mutilations were reported in and around Freetown. Cows and horses found dead under strange circumstances, often with precise, clean wounds that local farmers and some investigators said did not match typical predator behavior. Around the same time, rumors began to spread that occult or cult activity was taking place deep inside the Freetown State Forest. Rumors that intensified dramatically in 1978 when the body of a young man named Ed Davis Jr., misremembered by some as Ed Devlin in local retellings, was discovered inside the forest. Investigators at the time explored, among other theories, possible connection to occult ritual activity, though this was never conclusively proven, and the case remains, in many respects, unresolved to local satisfaction. Now I want to pause here because this is where a lot of horror retellings get careless. A real young man died. This was not folklore. This was a human tragedy that happened to occur inside a forest already saturated with legend. And I think that's worth remembering. Sometimes real grief gets absorbed into local mythology, and the mythology ends up louder than the person who was actually lost. That's the psychology of a place like this. Fear compounds. Every strange light, every dead cow, every missing hikers gets folded into the same story until the location itself becomes the explanation. Easier. Somehow, than sitting with the fact that terrible things sometimes just happen without a monster to blame. So, why the Bridgewater Triangle? Why not anywhere else? There are a few theories, and I will give you the grounded ones before the strange ones. Geologically, the region sits on a fault line, and some researchers have proposed that shifting quartz bearing rock underground could generate piezoelectric energy, small electrical charges that some fringe theorists believe could explain the ghost lights and even influence the human brain enough to produce sensations of dread, hallucination, or missing time. This is unproven, but it's a real, testable hypothesis some investigators have pursued. Psychologically, isolation plays a role. The swamp disorients. GPS fails in dense wetland. Sound travels strangely over water. A person already primed by decades of local legend, alone at night in a place that feels wrong, is a person primed to interrupt an owl, a deer, a marsh gas flare as something else entirely. And politically, historically, this was land taken by force from a people who already considered it sacred and dangerous. Following a war that ended in atrocity. Whether or not you believe in curses, it's not hard to understand why a place with that history might carry a weight that outlasts the people who caused it. Maybe the Bridgewater Triangle is not haunted by one thing. Maybe it's haunted by all of it: the land, the war, the grief, and 300 years of people walking into the dark and convincing themselves something was walking back out toward them. Now, here's the unsettling part. This is not a story from 100 years ago. People are still reporting thunderbirds over Route 44. Hikers are still avoiding parts of the Freetown State Forest after dark. The lights are still seen. Whatever is happening in those 200 square miles, geological, psychological, historical, or something we don't have a name for, it has not stopped. And that brings me to why I wanted to tell you this story tonight. My channel exists because of stories like this one. Real places, real history, real fear that does not fully go away just because we cannot explain it. If you are, or if you have ever lived somewhere like this, a house, a road, a stretch of woods near your own town that people avoided, that had its own quiet reputation, its own story nobody could quite finish. I want to hear it. So write to me. Tell me what happened. Tell me where it was. I read every single one, and some of you may hear your own story told exactly like this, right here on a future episode. Until then, stay safe out there, and maybe next time you are driving through the woods at night, don't stop for the lights.